This is Sunday Skate with Scott McLaughlin, Andrew Razor Raycroft, and Bridgette Prue on WEEI.
This building is as full as it was at the start. Everybody standing, hoping the Bruins can find a way to tie the score in the dying seconds. Geekie and Lundell off the face-off. Marchand gets the puck. Marchand's backhand rolling towards the net. Ekblad steers it around. 4 seconds left. It's out of the zone. Matthew Tkachuk celebrating as the Florida Panthers, for the second straight season, will play in the Eastern Conference Final.
What a hockey game this was, and Forsling is down, and the boys are picking him up because he just had an unbelievable hockey game for the Florida Panthers. Ends up scoring the game-winning goal, makes a number of unbelievable plays defensively, and in a really closely fought game and a series that had a lot to it, a lot of elements. These two teams will shake hands right now with all the animosity and all the stuff that has gone on.
Paul Maurice of the Florida Panthers are moving on. And for the second straight season as well, Brad Marchand and the Boston Bruins season ends by shaking hands with the Florida Panthers.
Just been a domination here in Boston by the Florida Panthers. And the record shows that out. Well, Marchand and Bennett having a conversation right there. And Marchand just wants to go forward there, but those two will battle again.
Welcome into Sunday Skate, the final Sunday Skate of the season. We're with you for 3 hours, always up till noon. Today, I'm Scott McLaughlin with Bridgette Prue, Nico behind the glass. Razor is at his son's hockey right now, but he will be with us the 11 a.m. hour. That, of course, is the final call of the Bruins, of the end of the Bruins season. A 2-1 loss in Game 6 Friday night at TD Garden. They give up the winning goal with 1:33 left in regulation off the stick of Gustav Forsling. And so for the second straight year, the Bruins season ends at home against the Florida Panthers a round later this year in the second round. Bridgette, now that we're about 36 hours removed from that loss, what are kind of your thoughts on how this season ended and the season as a whole for the Bruins?
Well, that's a lot to get in, really, right off the top, Scott. But to start with the game and also the series, I think that it was pretty clear that they were a few pieces away from being able to beat the Panthers. They had better offensive firepower than the Bruins did. It was kind of clear. It made things clear for the offseason what they should focus on, which would be adding a forward, maybe a center, or another winger. They seem to need someone else that can put pucks in the back of the net, because one thing that Montgomery said after the game was you can't expect to win every game 2-1. In the playoffs, you're going to need to score more than one or two goals per game, and that's just not what they were doing in this series.
Yeah, and really the playoffs as a whole, once you kind of got past, a couple little bit higher scoring games early in that Toronto series, the rest of the way the Bruins scored 2 goals or fewer in 8 of their final 9 playoff games. So, as Montgomery said, yeah, you can't win them all 2-1. You needed perfection from Jeremy Swayman. You needed perfection from the defense. And that is a really tough road to go. That is a lot to ask of your back end. Yeah, they clearly need more up front. We can get into some of the guys in this series and in this postseason who did and didn't step up. It wound up being a pretty quiet series for David Pastrnak, just 1 goal. I would make the case that he really didn't have a whole lot of support around him. And you especially noticed the lack of a number 1 center. By the end of the series, he's playing with Morgan Geekie as a center, and I liked the way Geekie stepped up, and I liked the season he had overall, but he's just not number 1 center. The reality is, as we thought going into the year, you didn't have one of those. You didn't have someone who could match up with Alexander Barkov, who was, I think, the biggest difference in the series. I think he was the best player overall. To 10 points for the Panthers. So, yeah, that stands out. That's something you worried about all season. Might be a weakness. And, Coyle and Zacha had good regular seasons and stepped up with career highs points-wise. But in the playoffs, you needed more down the middle, and you just needed more scoring in general. And, yeah, that becomes the clear, obvious need for this offseason. There were a lot of positives from this season as well that we'll get into. But for now, I think, we'll start there just in, what this team needs offensively and why they weren't able to get more against the Panthers.
Yeah, and the the plus is that you're not looking at next season and with any doubt that Swayman can be a number one goalie and can bear a larger workload than he has earlier in his career. But yeah, did you want to stick to the shortcomings, or did you want to move over to the positives?
Sure. No, yeah, I think there's more to get to with the shortcomings because it's not. There's the roster where you can say, okay, you didn't have enough offense, you didn't have enough difference makers who could put the puck in the net. Your power play also went 1 for 16 in this series, and there should be enough talent for the power play to be better than that. So that's something I look at as, yes, we can say, all right, you got to get another difference maker on the power play. That would obviously help, but it's got to be frustrating as a fan too, because it felt like a lot of the same problems on the power play that they had in the second half of the season and down the stretch. And there was a period very late in the regular season into the start of the Toronto series where you started getting more from the power play when you had your top guys split up, which is not really how it should go. When your top guys are together is when your power play should be at its best. And that just was not the case for this team really for the last several months of this season, when McAvoy, Pastrnak, and Marchand were all on the top unit. That unit wasn't good enough. And sure, maybe you say, hey, can we get a better bumper guy or a better net front guy to go with them? But you needed more from those guys in general. And obviously, Marchand missed 2 games in the series. We'll get into that. We'll get, his return. He opened up about his comeback and not being totally honest with doctors. And, we'll get into his comments about trying to hurt people in the playoffs. Those made a lot of headlines as well. But on the ice, ultimately you did need more from your top guy. You needed more support for them, but you also needed more from your top guys themselves.
Yeah, and the power play for sure was a huge struggle for them. They only got the 1 power play goal by Pastrnak, but even worse than the fact that they weren't scoring, they were losing momentum during their power plays. There were several where the Panthers outshot Boston when Boston was on the power play. So, and they had a shorthanded goal in the series as well, and it looked not there was it just wasn't cohesive. And adding someone obviously would help. Adding like Reinhart, who is on the Panthers, who is going to be a free agent this offseason, who has the most power play goals of anyone this season. He's available, and I have to imagine that would be a guy you'd want to target to help you. He can play the bumper on the power play. He's great 5-on-5 too. And that would add depth to your top 6 forward group. Something like that. Or Elias Lindholm has been a name that's linked as well to Boston a few times. He's a free agent at the end of the season as well. So those are we're looking for the Bruins to add a bigger name this offseason than anything they were able to do last offseason.
Yeah, Reinhardt's a tough. I can't imagine the Panthers are going to let him get away. They do have cap space as well, so I'd read that there's mutual interest in getting something done, but obviously it hasn't happened. It won't happen now until their season's over. But I imagine that's a name that ultimately won't end up on the actual free agent market. And even if it does, he's going to get over $10 million probably a year. So that would be your one move. That would be the move. Yeah. There's other names, as you said, Lindholm. I think Elias Lindholm isn't a perfect player to me, and like I would have some reservations about spending big money on him and committing to him long term. But you need a first line center so badly that you might have to make that plunge, because the other options are finding it by trade. And I don't know who that would be by trade, and I don't know how you get that player by trade, because the Bruins don't have a lot of draft picks. They don't have a lot of blue chip prospects.
This year, there's really nothing to even cover for the draft for the Bruins this year. They
don't have a pick. They don't have a pick until the 4th round. Now they might get one if they trade Linus Ullmark, which is another topic we'll throw on the table and get into, because, as you said, the big positive from this postseason was you found out that Jeremy Swayman is that guy. You found out he's your number one. He took the starting job and ran with it. Something he hadn't done, he hadn't really gotten a chance to do before. So you don't know until you see it. Now you know. He was the best goalie in these playoffs across the entire league. And you should feel comfortable now committing to him long term. Yes, he's going to cost more because of this run. So what? Like, you found security at that position.
Yeah, and they had undervalued him for sure. That's why they ended up in arbitration last offseason, and why there was some hurt feelings about it as well. And technically it could go back to arbitration again. But I think
that'd be a disaster.
That would be a disaster. Both sides would really want to avoid that. And the Bruins don't have the argument that they had last year, which is like, okay, you're a number 2. Like, he's clearly not a number 2 goalie. You need to pay him like a number 1 goalie. And he's completely driven his price up with this playoff run. And that means that Ullmark's probably out of town, because you can't have more than, Swayman's going to get more than Ullmark's deal, which is $5 million. So you're going to have all of this money tied up in the goaltending position if you don't trade Ullmark. But you don't want to give him up for nothing either. He's in the last year of his contract. So it'll just be, it could end up being the last time we saw the goalie hug, which I know is disappointing for some people. But maybe the duo is over because Swayman's gonna take a lot of money, and that might not leave any space for Ullmark.
Yeah, the Bruins have to add up front, and you need money to do that. And getting Ullmark's $5 million off the book is, in addition to the cap space you already have, is the fastest way to do that. And again, we're going to get it more into the offseason breakdown and look ahead as we go. I feel like I can already sense Bruins fans getting their hopes up too much in terms of what the team's going to be able to do this offseason, because you look at it and like Cap Friendly has them at $21 million in cap space right now. So if you trade Ullmark, that's $26 million, and you think, oh, great, that's a lot of money. Well, when you add in this same extension, if you do go and get number 1 center, like all of a sudden you're already cut into a huge chunk of that. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of people who are like, they need a number 1 center, they need another scoring wing, and they need to upgrade the defense. I'm just going to tell you right now, they're not doing all that. Like, it's not going to happen. Don't set yourself up for that. Like, don't expect them to add 3 high-impact players high in the lineup, because they are not going to be able to. And
they really don't have a huge need at defense. They may need to add a 7th defenseman, but they have 6 guys that should be starting next season. They already signed Weatherspoon, and Peake still has a year left on his deal. Your top 4 guys are McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, and Lohrei. I mean, that's a solid 6 to start with. You're probably going to lose Forbert and Grzelcyk. They're both free agents. So maybe you add a depth defenseman. Shattenkirk also a free agent. So you sign someone else for a 7th defenseman, but you don't really need to focus on that. I don't think that that's where the money is best spent, because it's already a very good defense core.
Yeah, I agree. Like, could you use an upgrade somewhere? Sure, you always can. Every team can always get better, but you're in a salary cap league. You're not going to be able to build a perfect roster, so you have to decide where you're spending. And for me, these playoffs made it clear that I'm spending up front. I'm adding ideally a center, but scorers in general. Like, you just need offense. on Swayman, so we already have a text in here from 603 saying Swayman gave up too many soft goals and that the final goal was a soft one. Listen, Swayman himself didn't like the last goal. He called it unacceptable. He didn't see Forsling's shot, the final shot that actually beats him, that squeaks through Wotherspoon, just finds a hole in Swayman. But he thought he should have done a better job controlling the rebound. And I would agree with that. The rebound should have been to the corner, all the way to the boards, not put back out in front like that. But this is where I get into... Look, Jeremy Swayman, the final 3 games of the series, .939 save percentage. For the playoffs overall, .933. First in the NHL by 10 points. Igor Shesterkin second, .923. Swayman led the whole playoffs in goals saved above expected. Realistically, I just don't think you're getting better. That's elite goaltending. So, yes, there's always going to be, goals you can pick here and there and say, yeah, he probably should have had that or he could have done better. But, again, this comes back to not being able to score more, is you end up demanding perfection from your goalie. There is no wiggle room. There was no margin for error in that series. And that's where, you got to commit to Swayman. You found your number one goalie. Let's not overthink this. Because what's the other option? So this texter, if you don't want to pay Swayman, what is your plan at goalie?
Yeah, you only have Ullmark. Yeah, you'd have to stick with Ullmark, but that's not the plan. That is not the ideal way to approach anything. And I hope that they learned their lesson from last year. And Swayman has been clear about how he would like the process to be handled differently. And I don't think Swayman is gonna be difficult about it. He wants to get the deal done too. So that's a huge thing they got to get done. And that's one of the ones that's I'm very confident that gets done and that gets done the right way. There's other signings that I'm not as sure about, like Jake DeBrusk.
Yeah, definitely want to get into DeBrusk. We got to catch our first break here, but we'll hear some of Swayman's comments after the game. Got calls. You can call in 617-779-7937. Text us 37937. Bridgette has your trending, and we will be right back.
What was it like hearing the crowd cheer your name after the game ended?
Tears. I couldn't be more grateful to have a city, have a home base that's as supportive as Boston. And they mean so much more than just fans to me. It's truly a home for me now. And to hear that was above and beyond. I'm just so grateful for all the love and support, and we wouldn't be here without them. So that was an incredible moment to be a part of it.
Welcome back to Sunday Skate. That was Jeremy Swayman after the end of the Bruins season Friday night in Game 6. As the handshake line wound down and Swayman finished going through, the crowd that was left at TD Garden started chanting "Swayman, Swayman." That's what he's responding to there, saying that it brought him to tears. I was a little bit surprised, but the fans that stuck around were very, very supportive. And during the handshake line and as the guys were leaving the ice, they gave Swayman that ovation, like you mentioned. They were chanting "Let's go Bruins." It was nice to see. It was a very respectful way to end the season and acknowledge that they probably made it as far as their ceiling this year. Yeah, and I think those fans who stick around until the end of that, those are the ones who want to send that message, who want to show appreciation or an acknowledgement that, they felt like this team and Swayman in particular gave it their all, and to your point, did honestly probably get as far as they reasonably could have. That's how I feel. I know that's not. If it was the first round, they weren't staying around to cheer that. If they had lost Game 7 to Toronto in overtime, you're not getting that reaction. No. But Yeah, it's interesting though, because obviously there are some fans who aren't happy, and we're getting texts from some of them. Someone says Swayman definitely wasn't the best goalie in the playoffs. He was top 5. Listen, I don't know what playoffs you're watching. Like,
I don't know.
Watch other series and tell me there's even 3 goalies who have had a better postseason than Jeremy Swayman just did. Like, there's just not. I'm looking at it. Swayman, .933 save percentage. Igor Shesterkin next at .923. And then you're down to like Jake Ottinger, .918. Money Puck does goal save above expected if we want to get into the nerdy advanced stats
Which
here.
you always do.
Jeremy Swayman, 13.3 goals saved above expected in the playoffs in all situations. Next is Shesterkin at 8.8, almost 5 goals below. And then you're down to Jake Ottinger at 5.2. Like, it's really not that close, guys. Like, Swayman was really good, and I feel like you got to try to twist yourself into a pretzel or just demand perfection. Like, and I'm just going to say this, if you're expecting your goalie to be absolutely perfect and never give up
shutout
any like remotely
championship.
questionable goals, you are going to be a miserable mihockey fan, because that goalie does not exist.
Swayman did not give Boston head pains. Like there was I said this to you in the break. I can only think of 2 goals that I would call soft. And unfortunately, one of them was at the end of Game 6 with 1:33 left. And then there was another one that he probably could have or should have had a long-range shot from Montour from the point. Those were the only 2 that I can remember that I was like, maybe. But, goalies, they give those up. And even the if you want to call it a soft goal at the end of Game 6, he was slightly screened by Wotherspoon. And, he probably shouldn't have given up that rebound, at least controlled that puck a little bit better. But you can't look at this series and twist it. Swayman was your best player.
Yeah, and it's worth looking ahead now to like what kind of contract is he going to get. I had thought during the season when these discussions were happening, I thought maybe something in like 5-6 year range, around like $6 million. It's gone up. I think you're now looking at, you probably want to max out the length, so that's 8 years. And AAV, you're probably looking at 7.5, 8, like somewhere in that range, somewhere just below the truly elite tier. Like, you have guys like Bobrovsky, Hellebuck, Ilya Sorokin has a new contract that kicks in next year. But you're probably just below that range. And the one edge those guys would have is they've done the 55 to 60 starts in a season, which Swayman still hasn't. So maybe that keeps it down a little. But you're looking at him as probably one of the 5 highest paid goalies in the league. And to me, based on this postseason, it's hard to argue against that. But happy to hear from people who might feel differently, who are reluctant to give Swayman that money.
Well, we do have a call on a line too. Chris from Chicago. I think we should go to him because he has something to say about Don Sweeney, who is supposed to be the person getting these deals done this offseason. So, Nico, you want to pot up Chris?
What's up, Chris?
Hey, good morning. I think that we should be probably pretty happy with where the Bruins ended up this year overall, because I just was surprised that they made it this far. And I think if you look at it big picture, you're closer to the bottom of the league than you are to the top. And it's really time to think about, maybe going the other direction instead of adding a few pieces, because you're not going to get to that elite tier of teams right now. You're just not going to beat them.
Chris, you were one of the last 8 teams standing, right?
Correct. Yeah, I just want you to hear me out here, though. But with some of you have a couple really bad defensive contracts with Lindholm and McAvoy. It's time to start thinking about really, guys like Mike. No one wants to hear this, but you got to think about trading Brad Marchand. You got to get something for him. And I just don't see the guy running the operation right now, Don Sweeney. Do you really trust him with the way that he's drafted in the past? You have no.
Well, they're
young
not
players
drafting this year until the 4th round.
But you have no young players. You have nobody that you can trade. You're in a really tough spot right now, and adding a high-end centerman, that's not going to get you to the promised land. It's time to think about going the other direction.
So you want them to be sellers and try to get draft picks? But
yeah, I was going to say. So we're blowing. All right, then. Thanks for the call, Chris. Listen, we welcome differing opinions here, but
I don't think they're trading Brad Marchand.
Laura and Matt Patra have both turned out great. Like
Beecher.
the Bruins prospects are coming up now.
Yeah.
Swayman was a Sweeney draft pick, was he not?
Yes.
I mean, I think its drafting has been better. Outside of that first year where the draft was a disaster and it was his first draft people, and you got Jake DeBrusk, who personally I think has panned out, and they should resign.
A big Jake DeBrusk fan.
Well, you need all these forwards. Everybody's talking about need another scoring winger, need a center. If you get rid of Jake DeBrusk, then you need another forward on top of that. He was your best player outside of Swayman in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
I think you keep that guy around.
I mean, he was your highest point scorer. A lot of good points, Nico. You nailed a few of those. Not sure Chris nailed many points on the call, but
no. Listen, it's an opinion for sure, but you're not blowing it up after
you're not selling pieces like Brad Marchand to get draft picks. That's like what you're just giving up. Like that's crazy. This of any year would have been the bridge year. It's not next year.
Right. You the season after Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci retired, and you lost Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi and Dmitry Orlov as cap casualties. A year after you went all in on an all-time regular season team that came up short in the playoffs, you had to piece this together with value players on $1 million or league minimum in the case of Dent and Heinen coming in on a PTO. Like, you were just bandaging this thing together this season, and you won a round.
Made it to the second round.
Took the Florida Panthers, one of the cup favorites all season, to 6 games. And listen, like, I don't want to like go overboard and celebrate, hey, you got to the second round and lost in 6. Like, no, there's stuff to pick apart and criticize. And Sweeney wasn't perfect either. By the end of the season, there was a lot of money sitting on the bench, meaning Linus Ullmark as your backup goalie not playing, Matt Grzelcyk out of the lineup on $3.8 million salary, Derek Forbert out of the lineup, injured, $3 million. So, like, yes, there's stuff there to pick apart and criticize, but all things considered.
And it sounds like he tried to trade Ullmark.
Right. Yeah, we got those reports at the deadline that Ullmark exercised his no trade. And, you know, you're going to revisit that this summer. He still has the no trade list. He has 15 teams on it this summer. You know, I was reading from Flutus and Zawa in The Athletic this morning, and we had kind of heard whispers of this, but he had cited that one of the reasons Ullmark didn't want to get traded midseason was because obviously his family's here, and he has 2 kids who are in school, and he didn't want to either uproot his family or be away from his family for the rest of the season.
Which
you're
would have
more
been from
open
the
to
middle
that
of
in the
March
summer
until, you know, end of April, because I don't think he was getting traded to a contender. But if he did, then, you know, maybe even longer being away from your family. It's easy to see why someone would not want to do that. And also he loves being here. So, and we know that. We know he's really close with Swayman and the other guys on the team. So he didn't want to have it get broken up at that point, and that's understandable. But Don Sweeney did try to get something for him and potentially try to get a forward that maybe would have made a difference, added some more scoring in the playoffs. But in that move, there was probably another move to be made out there, but he wasn't willing to. Ullmark wasn't willing to waive his no trade.
Yeah, and there was also a rumor at the time that they were talking to at least one team that wasn't on his no trade list, but the deal didn't come together for other reasons. So, you know, we don't know who that was. There was speculation maybe that was the New Jersey Devils, who were in on every goalie imaginable, and you know, I don't think we're very happy with where they ended up, so they might be back in the market for a goalie this summer. Yeah, there's going to be options, and also Linus Ullmark's now entering a contract year. He's entering the final year of his deal, so I'm sure he's not, you know, if you're paying Swayman big money and say upping his workload to 50 to 55 games, I don't think Linus Ullmark's going to want to play 30 to 35. I think he's going to want to go somewhere where he can be a starter because he deserves to be a starter. He's still at worst, he's one of the 10 best goalies in the NHL. Like, if you just look at his numbers this season, the second half that he had, it's very easy to forget this now, but down the stretch, he was better than Swayman.
Better.
Like, he was playing better.
In the last month, or even you can even date it back a little bit longer than that, he was the better goalie than Swayman. Swayman turned it on in the playoffs and never looked back, but Ullmark is definitely a top 10 goalie. You could probably go even higher than that. I mean, he was last year's Vezina winner, and he's still that good. I don't think he's fallen off at all. I mean, he had such a great year the year before. He's still that goalie, and obviously he wants to be a starter. He doesn't want to, and he shouldn't be a backup in this league.
Let's go to Maria from Watertown. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning. First of all, before I go off on the Bruins, I want to thank both of you, all of you, for doing the show every Sunday, giving us fans a platform to vent, to offer opinions, as crazy as some of them may be or delusional as they may be. So thank you for giving up your time and also for keeping us informed. Now, how appropriate.
Thank you, Maria.
How appropriate that the Boston Bruins lost a critical game on home ice with a late goal. And how many times have we seen this movie over and over again, and the ending doesn't change? So therefore, Jim Montgomery can give me all the stats that he wants about how, hockey has changed and the road teams, win more games on the road. I don't care. I don't care, because you should be able, when your crowd is behind you and you're in the comforts of your own home, you should be able to win those games and you should be able to finish. Did Jeremy Swayman make a mistake at an inopportune time? Yes, he did. But that was one of the few mistakes that he made. The rest of the team, including the core of this team, had numerous opportunities during the course of that game to extend the lead. I saw opportunities for our high-priced defensemen who were basically given open ice by the Florida Panthers and chose not to take the open ice and skate up the ice with the puck, instead fly it down to the other end of the rink. So I, frankly, am tired of seeing the same ending over and over again. There needs to be a reconstruction. I'm not saying a total blow up this roster, but clearly since 2019, now with two different coaches, we're back with the same results. Yes, I know. They won Game 7 against Toronto, but that was luck. Mitch Marner was a dummy, and it gave Pasta that one opportunity to get by him. But it's from top to bottom, too. I don't understand the philosophical approach by this team. It seems to me to be too passive when you watch other teams that are playing with aggressiveness, with speed. Like, our power play is so slow. It is so easy to defend. And whoever the coach of that power play is needs to be shown the door. So I think everything needs to be looked from the top on down. But here's my question. Any potential changes starts with goaltending, with the goalies. What if Linus Ullmark and his camp decide to play hardball and he doesn't waive his no-trade clause? What happens then?
Well, you might be able to still trade him to the other 15 teams.
Yeah, there's still 16 teams he can't block a trade to. So you have some room to work with. Obviously, you'd be limited.
And you wouldn't get as much because, you'd be the offers would be fewer. You'd have less competition. So you probably wouldn't get as much in return as if he said he was willing to waive it. You'd have less options for actual players you could target and, rather if you weren't targeting a draft pick. So, yeah, it would complicate things for sure. Maria, when you say an off-season shakeup, is there any players in particular you think that you want to see go the other way, go out the door?
Yes, I have my own opinions about Jake DeBrusk, and I know he was good in the playoffs, but to me, he didn't show me enough during this season in a contract year where I would keep him. I'm sorry, I just wouldn't. And call me crazy, but I'm done with streaky players on this team. They can't afford to have streaky players.
He did say he had a hand injury for half the season. He was playing with a broken hand. I don't know how you do that, but
at the bye,
right before the All-Star break.
What was going on? I guess that would be my question. Okay, so what was your theory before the bye? Because I didn't see the production that I needed to see. For me personally, I am open to listening to any and all offers at this point and not shutting the door on anything. And I know Pasta takes a lot of heat because he doesn't show up in the playoffs. But my God, what was Pavel Zacha doing during the entirety of the playoff series? The entirety. He had one freaking goal.
And it was in the last game. He was the only one who scored in Game 6.
Right. So what were you doing when clearly the opposing team was focused on him, and you presumably, with your line mates, whoever it was at that point in time, had room, and you didn't take advantage of it. So,
And he didn't score last playoffs either.
No, he did not. Passengers, I'm all set with passengers on this team. And, the young guys, I'm grateful that they gave these young guys an opportunity, but we also need to remember that this is an ownership group that really won't tolerate losing or having their building full. So this team is not in a position where they're going to go full rebuild mode or full blow it up mode.
No.
Yeah. But,
thanks, Maria. Sorry. Yeah, I agree with that. We got to catch a break. I do want to get into DeBrusk after this break. Again, you can join us 617-779-7937. Text in 37937. We will be right back.
Empty feeling when you lose your last game of the season, but do you take any solace in the way you kind of picked up your game as the playoffs went along and kind of bounced back from what was a rough regular season for you?
Yeah, well, it was a rough regular season. I was dealing with some injuries, broke my hand probably right before bye week, so I missed a game actually. Didn't really heal probably till about a week out of playoffs, so I knew my playoffs were going to be better. I could shoot the puck. It was my bottom hand, so the medical staff did a great job of making sure I was ready to play and all that stuff, but there were some things that are going on this year, which makes it frustrating, not being able to do that and just feeling limited, to be honest with you. I tried to play through it. I thought that I could help the team out in different ways, whether it's penalty killing or stuff like that, but I knew I was going to have a good playoffs. I think that I've had confidence in that, but at the same time, I think I said after game one of the whole thing, I didn't care what I did. I wanted to win.
Welcome back to Sunday Skate. That is Jake DeBrusk that you just heard from right there. I'm Scott McLaughlin, Bridgette Prue, Nico behind the glass, Jake DeBrusk's biggest fan. We get Razor will be joining us 11 a.m. hour. He's at his kids' hockey right now.
And I got an update from Breakup Day, which is going on right now at just down the street at the Bruins practice rink Warrior.
Any big news from the first hour?
Very slow first hour. Two players have come and spoken. Really, you end up talking to most everyone on Breakup Day.
Every player is made available at some point.
So just two so far. We will bring you updates from that, but it doesn't sound like there's much as of right now.
We haven't brought you any updates because there haven't been any.
Yes.
So not missing anything there.
But, so you hear DeBrusk talking about his hand injury, right? That's the kind of stuff we find out about on Breakup Day. A lot of times we find out about lingering injuries or stuff that we just weren't privy to during the season because he's not going to come out and say that if the Bruins are still playing. Like, this is something that you find out after the season's over. Marchand also shed light on what he was dealing with and confirmed it was a concussion and he was in protocol and that's why he wasn't playing in the second round.
Keefe right again.
Keefe, yes, nailed it. Missed the exact 2 games that Keefe said. Came back for Game 6. Marchand said he kind of, fibbed a little bit, saying he was doing better than not telling them about everything, but I mean, that's players just want to get into games and play. And he did not want to come out of game 3. And so, yeah, he told them he was okay when he wasn't, and they knew that. So they took him out. They put him in protocol. But so those are 2 injuries already that we've gotten more information on. And I wonder if we're gonna find out that someone else was dealing with something during the playoffs, because there were a few guys that didn't look 100% like themselves. So who knows? Like there could be more to come out of that today. And I personally thought that potentially Brendan Carlo was playing through something. Last game he didn't play at all in the last 5 minutes. He played fewer minutes than he had all series. He seemed, like they kept skipping over him, and he's such a good defenseman. There would have been no other reason to really skip over him at that point in the game when it was tied. So I don't know. I wonder if there's something to come out from that.
Carlo got hammered by Nick Cousins late in the second period, so I wonder if it was something following from that. But yeah, on DeBrusk, so if people remember, he did miss the final game before the All-Star break. Then they go on break for a week. They come back. And I remember one of the first times we talked to him after that, we asked him, like, how you feeling? Like, what? Obviously he missed the last game. And he said, yeah, I feel better. And he made a comment at the time, like, I wish I had a little more time to recover, to be honest, but I'll be okay. And it's like, now that makes sense when you hear, broken hand. Obviously, it can always vary, and there's different bones in your hand that you can break. But, like, usually that's kind of a 2-week injury in the NHL. If it's not something more serious, like that's about what Andrew Peeke missed when he suffered a hand injury in the first round. I guess, we don't know if that was 100% broken, but I'm going to take an educated guess at that off a shot block. So, yeah, Sam Bennett with Florida, same thing. He blocked a shot in the first round, missed about 2 weeks, and then came back for, was for game 3. And when he then sucker punches, his hand looked great on that sucker punch. But yeah, so DeBrusk, listen, he led your team in goals and points in the playoffs. 5 goals, 11 points in 13 games. Now, he was also a -5, so like we have to mention that. So he was on the ice for some goals against.
He had an incredible assist on the Zacha goal in Game 6.
And would have had a second incredible assist if Pastrnak had finished off his breakaway. That was another great stretch pass by DeBrusk up to Geekie, who then kind of just one-touched it over to Pastrnak for a breakaway. I thought he was really good. And the goals against that he was on the ice for, I can't really think of any of them that I would pin on him. I mean, just look at Game 6. Like, he's out there for that first goal of the game, but he has a big shot block in the slot. By the way, he had, I think, 5 shot blocks in Game 6. So committed defensively, and then, the Bruins around him just can't clear that puck out of the slot. It's on Wotherspoon's stick. He gets it poked away. It goes right to Anton Lundell, and he beats Swayman. So, yeah, I thought he played great in Game 6. I thought he was really good in the playoffs overall. And, as far as what you do with him, to me, it depends on how much money you're spending up front and where it's going. Because I feel like after locking up Swayman, the vast majority of the money I'm going to spend this offseason is up front. And say you go after Elias Lindholm, who, by the way, has had a pretty good postseason for the Vancouver Canucks after, a slow start there after the trade. He's playing 19 minutes a game. He's in this series against Edmonton. He's playing a bunch against McDavid and Draisaitl, and more than holding his own. The Canucks are outscoring the Oilers when he's on the ice against those guys. Say you get him for $8 million a year. Are you also then going to spend money on a big name winger, whether that's Reinhart if he's available, which I don't think he's going to be, or Jake Gensel, who I don't think Carolina's going to be able to keep. I think he's probably going to get to the open market, but that's probably a $9+ million player, maybe even approaching 10. So that's a tier or two above Jake DeBrusk in terms of what you're paying. DeBrusk, again, all we can do is guess, but I'm going to say maybe he comes in around 5.5, 6. If he gets to the open market, I think he can probably get 6. Maybe he takes a little less. By all accounts, he likes it here. So if you only have that much money budgeted for that spot, can you do better than Jake DeBrusk? And I don't know if you can.
Yeah,
we can get into some of the names because we do have to catch a break here. But Bridgette, just quickly, your thoughts there.
Yeah, just to keep it quick, and then get back to it after the break. You don't want to subtract from your top 6, and I think you know what you have with him. And he came through when it mattered. He's been pretty good in clutch situations and in games like. He was great at Fenway. If you recall back to last season, he was for the Winter Classic. He had a good playoffs this year. I personally hope they give him a fair offer. And maybe he leaves because he gets something better somewhere else. But I'd be disappointed if the Bruins didn't try to offer him something fair.
Yeah, more to get to there after the break. See some phone calls we got to get to. Hour 2 of Sunday Skate coming up next.
This is Sunday Skate with Scott McLaughlin, Andrew Razor Raycroft, and Bridgette Prue on WEEI.
Jim, be in control of the game in the second period. You have multiple grade A's. When they didn't go, did you sense frustration at all?
I didn't sense frustration, but the lack of our ability to score in the playoffs in general. You can't win every game 2-1.
Welcome back to Sunday Skate. Scott McLaughlin with Bridgette Prue here. Nico behind the glass. Razor will be joining us in the 11 a.m. hour. Yes, that's right. There will be an 11 a.m. hour of Sunday Skate for our
bonus hour.
Our season finale here will be going up till noon. Actually, technically 12:05 before Red Sox. But
you got the world's longest text. It takes up the entire, it's like a novel. It's separated into 30 of its own texts. That's insane.
Yeah.
We cannot read that.
It's from the 603, and just gonna apologize because the way our text machine works, they don't when they're multi-part, they don't always come in order. So a little hard to get through. You can send an email if you want, scott.mclaughlin@odyssey.com. But, I'll
Be
read
careful
that.
what you wish for, Scott.
Yeah, well, that's fine. But yeah, so we were talking about Jake DeBrusk before the break, and what do you just bring him back because, maybe your big money addition is a center like Elias Lindholm. Do you have enough money for another big money addition up front? Because that's where I would be okay with moving on from DeBrusk is if you're signing more or trading for, either one, a more surefire, consistent scorer who's a clear upgrade. So, if you're telling me you're going to go splurge for Jake Gensel, who is a consistent 35 to 40 goal scorer, a point per game player in the playoffs for his career, sure, sign me up. Absolutely. I just don't know if you're going to have the $9 to $10 million to do that and add a number one center. That's a lot to ask because, again, you still have to fill in the rest of your roster, and you have to give Swayman an extension with a pay raise. So I'm telling, I want to warn people because that $21 million or $26 million if you trade Allmark, it doesn't get you all the pieces you think it's going to get you. Just filling in a roster costs money, making sure you have your depth and all that. You're probably, if you don't count DeBrusk or a similar player in that range as a big money ad, if that's just, a nice secondary spend this offseason, if Swayman and number one center are your big money contracts this summer, I don't know that there's going to be enough there for a scoring winger as well. But, listen, you can always find a way to finagle some money around. Maybe there's a way to make it work, but you also run the risk of letting DeBrusk get to the open market. He finds his money somewhere else. you don't land the Jake Gensel or player X that you're targeting, and now you end up settling for someone who might not be as consistent as DeBrusk, or might not be as good as DeBrusk, or might not be as good of a fit in your system as DeBrusk.
Yeah, you were going to get yelled at if you said
right.
consistent.
Yeah, consistent,
as DeBrusk.
not the word for DeBrusk.
No, not quite. And by the way, DeBrusk is actually one of the younger guys on this list of available free agent forwards this offseason at 28 years old. And Bertuzzi's back. Would it be something you would consider doing, bringing Bertuzzi back? I mean, he plays the same position as DeBrusk. Like, if DeBrusk leaves, does Bertuzzi fit it? Like, do you try him again?
I would rather have DeBrusk, like, if that's the choice. I just think DeBrusk plays a more complete game.
I agree with that. I completely agree with that.
You know, Bertuzzi finished this season better than he started it in Toronto, and there is certainly an element of physicality there. Not that he's like the biggest, hardest hitter in the world, but he obviously plays a scrappy style. We saw that last year. I'm looking at Evolving Hockey, and they have their contract projections. I don't think these aren't like their final projections, because I think they do it again once the entire season's over. But they have DeBrusk projected 5 years, $5.8 million a year. Guys kind of right in that neighborhood. You're looking at like Chandler Stevenson, 4 by 6.1. He's 30 years old. Tyler Toffoli, 3 years, 6.1. He's 32 years old. Chandler Stevenson had a down year. I'd be a little bit worried about that.
Yeah, that's not high on my list of names that I'd be targeting.
Yeah, now he was really good for Vegas last year when they won the Cup. He has positional versatility. He can play some center. I don't think he wouldn't be your first-line center. He's not that.
No.
Tyler Toffoli is a player I've always liked. He's also 32 going on 33. He's had some quiet postseasons in recent years. This year in Winnipeg, 2 points in the first round. Winnipeg lost that series, got knocked out. So, what
do you think about Steven Stamkos?
So someone texted in about that too, and had Stamkos as their number one priority, actually. And I think Stamkos is going to get pretty big money. First of all, I think he's probably going to stay in Tampa. I still don't see the Lightning actually letting him leave. But even if they do, even if he gets to the open market, I mean, if he's looking at, like, if you're looking at $7.5, $8 million, I think you're paying a guy who is shifting towards a power play specialist as he gets into his mid-30s. He's 34, going on 35. I don't know that that's who I'm targeting. He doesn't really play center anymore. He's more of a wing at this point in his career. So I don't think you're not signing him to be your number one center. And he was not very good 5-on-5 this year for the Lightning. He was terrific on the power play still. Mm-hmm. He has an incredible shot. He's on a loaded power play where teams can't just key on him. But even if you brought him here, he plays the same spot on the power play that David Pastrnak plays. They both line up in that left circle. So could you switch Pastrnak over to the other side? Yeah, I guess. But is he going to be thrilled that he's now giving up all his one-timers to Steven Stamkos? Like, I don't think it's really a fit. I get the appeal. Obviously, there's tons of Cup experience, and you're talking about a future Hall of Famer. There's a lot to love with Steven Stamkos, but I don't think that would be the best use of the Bruins' money.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a captain in this league for such a long time, too. He's a veteran. I'm worried that he is on the other side of it, like you mentioned. He's 34. I would probably go younger, which leaves you with someone like Elias Lindholm. I didn't realize Matt Duchene was 33. I actually really don't think I would target him. But he is an option at center as well. And the one guy on this list that I really like that I think is affordable is Jonathan Marchessault.
I really like Jonathan Marchessault. Conn Smythe winner last year for Vegas on their Cup run, 40-goal season this year. Now, he is 33, and he's 5'9", so like some concerns there about how many years you're giving him and how that would hold up going forward. But no doubt a really good player, a really good goal scorer, a playoff performer. Again, ultimately it comes down to money. Like, he's not going to cost the same amount as Jake DeBrusk. He's going to cost more. So is that kind of that middle ground between maybe like the truly high-end contract like a Jake Gensel and the DeBrusk price range? Like maybe like that's something I would consider. Like that makes a lot of sense. Let's go back to the phone lines here. We got Mark in Medford with some thoughts on Hampus Lindholm. Good morning, Mark.
Yeah, what's up? How's it going? I got some thoughts on Lindholm and another guy on the back end as well I want to add. But first off, except for the year we acquired Lindholm, has he really lived up to expectations? Because I don't think so, especially in the playoffs. I mean, this year it looked like his legs were moving, but he wasn't. And he was falling all over himself. I was like, okay, is this guy injured again? But I don't think he was. I think he's just not a playoff defenseman. And as far as Charlie McAvoy goes, is this it? I mean, 7 years now in the league, this guy was supposed to be the heir apparent to Zdeno Chara. And I'm sorry, but Zdeno Chara is a way better defenseman than Charlie McAvoy.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I mean, listen, like, so I know that there's the expectation of McAvoy being part of the great lineage of Bruins defensemen. You know, I mean, I guess you could really go like always back to Eddie Shore if you wanted, but we'll stick with like Bobby Orr to Brad Park to Ray Bourque. A little bit of a gap there, but then Zdeno Chara. So yes, you would love for Charlie McAvoy to be next in line, and that's been the expectation. Absolutely fair to say a little bit of a down year for him, down postseason. Of course, he had the huge Game 5. You know, he was their best player, stepped up, facing elimination. I thought he was pretty good in Game 6. I didn't have any issue with. Now, he didn't take over like he did in Game 5. But yeah, it's fair to say you want more from McAvoy. I would caution against the whole idea of like, is this all he is? Is it all he is? I mean, at worst, he was still a top 10 to 12 defenseman in the NHL this season. Like, I had an awards vote this year, and you get to vote for 5 players for the Norris, and McAvoy wasn't seriously under consideration, but after like the initial group of 7 or 8 that you give initial like serious consideration to, he wasn't that far off after that. Like, even in what we think is a down year, again, just conservatively, like, he was one of the 12 best defensemen in the NHL, and that is a really good spot to be. He has been a top 5 defenseman in the NHL before. He's finished top 5 in Norris Trophy voting, and that was deserved. Like, that wasn't like undeserved. There wasn't any sort of Boston bias. He was a top 5 defenseman. By the way, Hampus Lindholm last year finished top 5 in Norris voting, so that was like, you got to say Hampus Lindholm met and exceeded expectations last year, at least in the regular season.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I think the concern with McAvoy is that it doesn't have it's not as much to do with the regular season as it is the fact that he looked off in the playoffs. And I'm not saying every game, but there were certainly games where he didn't look like what we've seen out of him for most of his career. So I could see why there's concern come playoff time when he's not being your best defenseman on the ice. And I do think he has more to offer in terms of offense. He didn't have his best playoffs. You can't say he did. But like you said, he's still your top pair defenseman. Something was a little bit off, and hopefully he figures it out, corrects it. I don't know if postseason pressure had anything to do with it or what, but I understand the criticism of some of the games that he had in the postseason.
Yeah, I really think like if he can just be a more aggressive shooter offensively, like that's going to go a long ways. There's just too many times where he's hesitant or it looks like he's looking for the perfect play and he's just not ready to fire on net as soon as he gets the puck when he could. And I think that's part of the power play struggles too. Like, it would be such a huge area of growth for him, and everything would look like his point totals would look better. He'd move up those Norris voting ranks if he develops into a better power play quarterback. Like, that's clearly an area where I think there's still a lot of room for growth for him. And it's going to be, an interesting decision for Jim Montgomery, or, I'm surprised we haven't gotten any fire Montgomery calls yet. But,
no, we got 2 Sweeney ones. One hung up before we got to him, but we've had 2 fired on Sweeney callers, which is interesting.
But yeah, let's say it's Montgomery back or whoever the coach is. You're going to have to decide going into next season, is McAvoy the quarterback of your top power play unit, or is that a job that's going to get turned over to Mason Lohrei, the young up-and-coming offensive-minded defenseman who, certainly did a lot to prove himself this postseason?
Well, maybe the competition helps McAvoy lift his game, because I know he doesn't want to lose that role.
Right.
So, maybe the fact that there's someone that might take it from him makes he makes the adjustments he needs to. That's what you hope to see, at least. We're getting some updates, too, from breakup day.
Can I pause you?
Yes, I'm going to tease it. Okay. We have a break coming up here, but there is some injury news, like I said, that we thought we might be getting of some guys playing through some injuries, so we will get that to you after the break.
Yep, and we got to take a break right now. Bridgette has you trending, and then we'll be right back with some of those updates. Welcome back to Sunday Skate. I'm Scott McLaughlin with Bridgette Prue, Nico behind the glass. Razor joining in about 35 minutes or so for the 11 a.m. hour. We are going up till noon for our season finale here of Sunday Skate. Right before the break, we teased a little bit of news out of breakup day over at Warrior. So, Bridgette, what do we got?
Yeah, so there's some injury news coming out of breakup day. Fluto Shinzawa of The Athletic tweeting that David Pastrnak said that he was playing through reoccurring groin trouble this year, which is, that was not on our radar. And then also Hampus Lindholm said that he was injured. He injured his knee in February and was playing with a brace at that point in time on his knee. So 2 injuries that we did not know about that have been talked about so far in breakup day.
Yeah, I saw Emily Benjamin from NHL.com added on Pastrnak that he said it wasn't a factor in the playoffs. So, I'm sure it sounds like something he either, recovered from or just learned to manage or whatever. I guess going forward, you just hope it doesn't continue to be a reoccurring thing. When I hear that, I think of Patrice Bergeron for probably the last 5 years of his career was dealing with reoccurring groin issues that he had to constantly manage and work through and monitor and, undergo different treatments for. So, yeah, Pastrnak did, offensively, slowed down a little bit in the second half compared to the pace he was on in the first half. So maybe that was a factor, but he says it wasn't a factor in the playoffs. So on that front, I'll take him at his word and not use it as an excuse for for only scoring 4 goals in this postseason.
I still think that in the series he looked pretty good. He had a lot of chances that he should have had more goals. Now, and you can criticize him for not being able to finish, but he was in the right areas of the ice. In the Florida series against Toronto, no. Against Toronto, the criticism was pretty fair. And obviously he gets the huge goal in Game 7. But yeah, I didn't notice him playing. It didn't look like he was playing injured. He just was not finishing some of those chances.
Yeah, I did wonder a little bit early in the Toronto series. His ice time was down. He was 17 and a half minutes a game. And I was like, that's kind of weird. He should be up over 20 in the playoffs. And eventually he got there. His ice time did go up. But I in retrospect, I think that was almost more a case of, now maybe he was managing something, but I think that was almost more of a case of maybe Montgomery getting a little too cute with matchups and trying to keep him away from certain guys. You can do that to yourself in the playoffs. You try to manage matchups too much, and next thing you know, you just haven't had your star player on the ice enough. So yeah. I think that got corrected as the playoffs went on.
Well, at least the good news is if that's how David Pastrnak in the regular season played being injured, he still finished top 5 in the league. So he seemed to be okay, and you hope that he gets healthy and maybe you see him even have a better year next year if he can get that under control.
Well, and again, he had 110 points without a legitimate number one center next to him. And without,
you had a number one
and
center with him.
without a star on his other wing either. Like, if you look at the other guys who top 100 points this year, pretty much all of them have another star caliber or at least like really good player on their line, whether that's, a Zach Hyman with Connor McDavid, or even Draisaitl at times when they load up that top line in Edmonton, or Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen together. Austin Matthews gets Mitch Marner or William Nylander on his wing. Like, Pastrnak didn't have that. And so that's why I think you do have to add one top of the line, at least one top of the line forward. Like, he needs someone next to him, someone to help take that pressure off and just not put all the pressure on Pastrnak to be your entire offense, to have to create chances and finish them himself. Like, he shifted into more of a playmaker this year. He had a career high in assists. And part of that, and Montgomery talked about at times, was he had to do that because he didn't have a David Krejci getting him the puck like he did last year, or, Bergeron and Marchand doing the dirty work down low like he had when he was on the perfection line. Like, he had to do a lot more of the setup this year. And if you can either give him someone who's a better finisher for him to set up, or someone who is going to set him up more.
It's so clear they need a number one center. It's just so clear. And it was after last season too, but there's the reason why they had to rely on the internal solutions was because they didn't have the cap space. But now that they do, there's no excuse to not get a number one center that can help out David Pastrnak next season. There's nothing keeping you from doing it now. So give Elias Lindholm whatever he wants. Get him him and Pasta, get them together and get things going. Hopefully, they do something like that because it's so obviously needed. And Pavel Zacha, him with Pastrnak looked good when Krejci was there, but it's not as effective without Krejci. They do still have good chemistry together, but in the playoffs it wasn't doing much for you. In the playoffs they end up getting separated. So it's probably not your solution, Pavel Zacha, that having him as the center. And obviously it didn't end up that way in the playoffs. So you need to find someone that meshes with him and can really help him maybe even have a better season next year, like we were saying.
All right, let's go back to the phone lines here. Let's go to Jay in North Carolina. What's up, Jay?
Boo hiss. I had one regret till I got on the program and found this is your last show for the season. Now I got two regrets. But you guys put out an outstanding program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, you do. Best in on WEI, the best. Anyway.
The best hockey show, at least.
The only hockey show.
Good plug. Anyway, the other regret was that the Boston Bruins weren't allowed to bring their own referees. I think the referees were a major factor, and it shouldn't have been, but they were a major factor in this playoff game. And I don't know if you folks have watched the Rangers the way I have, but neither the Bruins nor the Panthers are going to get past the Rangers. Their passing around the periphery is blistering. I've never seen such crisp passing in the hockey league. Better than the Edmonton Oilers, better than anybody. And as far as Bennett and Tkachuk go, if they want to push that strong arm tactics that they pushed on the Bruins, wait till they find Matt Rempe. He's a man playing with boys. And as I say, I don't think they're going to get the Panthers will get past the Rangers. 5 games and that's it. Thanks, guys, and I'm sorry this is your last show, guys. You put on an outstanding program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
Well, we'll hopefully, we'll be back, right, next season. So this is our
I hope
second
so,
or
yeah.
third year. Yeah.
Hopefully we don't get canceled.
Yeah, that'd be unfortunate. But to Jay's point, the Rangers, they're going to be hard to get past. Like, the Rangers were not an ideal matchup for Boston in the third round. I would have been interested to see how Swayman handled the kind of offense that they have that they can bring. So that, like, he would have needed to be your X factor in that series. He would have needed to continue to be your best player. But yeah, that's a tough one.
I'm picking the Panthers.
You're not.
I'm gonna be
you're not.
I'm gonna be the world's last Rangers hater. I've been a skeptic of them all season. I'm not changing now. I don't think they're a great 5-on-5 team. I think they rely on special teams and Igor Shesterkin in net, and that's been a successful formula to this point. Although it did almost cost them against Carolina. They were up 3-0, and we're in danger of that series getting tied before Chris Kreider just blew up with a third-period hat trick to get the Rangers through in Game 6.
I saw a picture of him picking up hats from his front lawn. People were throwing hats on his lawn. He's just out there with, like, a trash bag. Like, guys, you got to stop doing this.
But, yeah, so one thing I think is going to be really interesting is the two divisions in the East, the Atlantic and Metropolitan, have been, like, two completely different styles of hockey. And the Atlantic has been the way more physical side of the bracket. So maybe if you're the Rangers, you hope that the Bruins might have done some damage to the Panthers, maybe banged up a few guys. We saw Reinhart and Bennett take off days during this series. You saw Barkov
was banged up
briefly
before.
Leave a game.
Yeah.
So maybe that helps the Rangers. Carolina was not a very physical team. I don't think the Rangers dealt with a whole lot in the way of real hard hitting in that series. So I think in that sense, like, I do wonder if the Rangers are going to get a little bit of a wake-up call going against a team that is actually really physical. On the other hand, the Panthers could get the wake-up call, of facing, more high-end skill than I know they faced some in Tampa, but Tampa, very reliant on special teams. The Rangers have guys who can make you pay for sure.
Yeah, I think the Rangers are winning that series, but
Panthers in 7.
No, I have to disagree with you on that one. We have another little update on an injury from Breakup Day. Fluto Shinzawa tweeting that Derek Forbert needed groin, and I think he meant thumb surgery. He wrote injury, but I believe he meant groin and thumb surgery, which we knew he had an upper and a lower body injury that he got work done on. He had those surgeries, and he was able to come back in the playoffs, but didn't end up getting a whole lot of playing time. But so those are what he was dealing with. And like we mentioned, he is a free agent after this year, so I'm not sure he comes back to Boston. He's been a player that has dealt with a lot of injuries.
Yeah, and that groin, that lingered really the majority of the season. I think that started even in training camp or preseason.
Yeah.
He had some days off way back then.
And then tried to play
through it, missed some time, came back, tried to play through it again. So, oddly enough, like, he was at his healthiest at the end, but it's really hard to get fully back up to speed and jump into a second-round playoff series, which he tried to do, and I thought he had a solid first game back, and then, ends up drawing back out of the lineup to make way for Wotherspoon and Peak once Peak got back into the lineup. So, I don't know. Like, Forbert, would you consider it if he's comes back really cheap and there's no guarantee of an everyday job? Like, maybe you consider that. You can never have too many defensemen, as the Bruins have learned year after year after year. You always lose guys on the blue line. But he might want to go somewhere where he's going to be guaranteed playing time, and that might not be here.
I don't think it is here.
Yeah.
After signing Wotherspoon and trading for Peak, that leaves Forbert as your 7th or so defenseman. So, and now that he's healthy, maybe he can go somewhere and still be in the top 6 of a different team. But I have a hard time thinking Boston would bring him back, just considering, first of all, the fact that they need to focus on other places around the roster. And they've seen him a long enough time to know that he does have a lot of injury troubles throughout the season. I want to answer this text. The 508 says, will the Bruins offer Maroon an extension now that they don't have Lucic? This is funny because we were talking about this the other day after the Game 6 loss. The Bruins don't have anyone like him on the roster. Like, he is the one guy that helps deter some of the bad behavior and some of the cheap shots and what have you. Without him on the team, I know Trent Frederick will fight sometimes, but no, people are not afraid of Trent Frederick. I don't mind the idea of bringing back Pat Maroon on an extension. Or
I wouldn't mind it, but the problem there is he doing much deterring if he's not in the lineup every night? Because I'm hoping to have a strong enough forward group that Pat Maroon would not be an everyday player. So would he be okay not being guaranteed an everyday role? And how much does he help if he's not? Like, I still think he helps off the ice. Like, I think he brought a good attitude to this team and kind of what they needed to hear at times. Like, you know, we talked to him after, you know, the whole Sam Bennett punch and all that, and he's asked about, you know, payback and all this stuff, and he kind of gets frustrated at a certain point, and is like, we just have to win a hockey game. And he threw in a word we're not allowed to say on radio in the middle of that, but like, I think that kind of mindset was what the team needed at that point, where it was like, guys, enough about Sam Bennett. Like, enough about, like, I went out, I offered him a fight. He didn't take it. Mm-hmm. What else do you want me to do? We have to go play hockey and try to win this series. And it felt like a reset that team needed.
To be honest with you, I think he's a decent fit here, and I think he's enjoyed his time since coming here. I don't think he's going to cost you a whole lot. I'm not sure if he wants more than a 1-year deal. Like, at most 2. I don't think that teams would really be offering him more than that. So, I mean, he might be looking to stay with a team that he thinks or go to a team that he thinks has a chance of winning another Stanley Cup, because he's at towards the end of his career, and you just got to get that last one if you can. But I like him. I actually would. I think I would sign him.
And because he's 35 plus, you can give him a 1-year deal with some bonuses. So, like, in theory, you could sign him for the veteran minimum, which obviously, you know, really helps you out in terms of being virtually nothing cap hit wise. And then you throw in another, you know, couple $100,000 in potential bonuses for games played or points or whatever. Like, maybe he's open to that, you know. Along the same lines, like, Kevin Shattenkirk would be another one who's eligible for that kind of contract.
I feel like Kevin Shattenkirk wants more ice time than he would get in Boston, though.
Yeah, again, that would be another one where maybe you approach him about it, see what he decides. But I do think he brought some leadership as well. We heard about, you know, the big speech he gave the night before Game 7 that everyone says helped the team and all that. If he's your 7th or 8th defenseman on a veteran minimum deal, I don't dislike that at all. But to your point, he might want to go somewhere where he's going to get to play more. So
yeah.
All right, we got to catch a break here.
I do want to say we're going to take these calls.
Yes, we do have some calls that we got to get to.
So hold on, because we are going to grab our calls, and then we're going to get Razorback. So.
Yep, and you can jump in on the phone lines if you want. 617-779-7937. Sunday Skate will be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Skate with Bridgette Prue. I'm Scott McLaughlin. Nico behind the glass. Razor coming up soon. We hope. We haven't gotten an update on what maybe his kids' game's going to overtime.
He's probably listening right now. He's probably driving in.
Yeah.
Hi, Razor.
So, couple quick updates to hit here from Breakup Day over at Warrior. Reading from Emily Benjamin of NHL.com. Jeremy Swayman was asked, are you hoping to sign long-term with the Bruins? I am. So, very straightforward there. Not a surprise. I had asked Swayman after Game 6 what he saw as his future here, and he wasn't ready to talk about it yet, which, you know, obviously you respect, but today made it very clear he wants to be here long-term. Pat Maroon also said he would love to stay. We brought him up in the last segment, so if there is that mutual interest and he's, you know, not just looking to cash in top dollar, because, again, I don't really think you should be spending significant money on a 12th or 13th forward, but I do think there's value there in his leadership and some of the physicality that he brings. So there's that. All right, let's get to some of these phone calls. Let's start with Phil in Seabrook. Phil says here you have some ideas on uncomfortable moves.
Yes. Hold on once. All right. First of all, I would take Bertuzzi over DeBrusk with this group 100 times out of 100. I think he's more of what the group needs. But as far as uncomfortable moves go, I think Sweeney has proven that he's great at picking up the bits and pieces. He's probably elite at it. I mean, he pulls guys and they just fit. He's great at it. But it's time to make uncomfortable moves. First of all, we need a defensive coach on staff. I feel like McAvoy would benefit great from that. But Lindholm is a contract that opens up money. Grzelcyk's got to go. There's so many guys on this team that can go, and there could be other guys that need to go. If you need it's to bring in a form of this team that can get past Florida and the Rangers. I think Bertuzzi does fit what we need to do against Florida a lot better than DeBrusk does, and he's more consistent, and he creates more opportunity through his lunacy, and he fit well with Pastrnak. But the uncomfortable moves, I mean, there's guys that we really like, but I don't think they're going to help us win. So it's time to do what we have to do to bring in the elite talent or much better talent, top-tier talent. Because if we don't do that, I mean, we're not going to really get much further. Pasternak's just dwindling away by himself. And if you bring in the top tier talent, I'm confident that Sweeney could fill out the roster and pull some really good things. So that's what I want.
Do you have any names that you think are players that that fans around here like, but you think that should be on the table for a trade?
Do you really want to go there?
Let's hear it.
All right, up until this last playoff run, Carlo was somebody that I'd considered to be an institutional loser and a mistake repeater. The guy makes mistakes that like high school players don't make, but he did it habitually up until this last like stretch of the end of the season and then the playoff run. I think we have institutional losers. So like guys who just can get you an awesome regular season and then melt in the playoffs. Lindholm 100% more than anything needs to go, and I loved Lindholm in Anaheim. Gotta go, bro. Sorry. I think there's value there. I'm a contrarian when it comes to Linus. If Linus wanted to stay, I don't think opening up $5 million is that important right now when we have bigger fish to fry. Grzelcyk's dad with the Zamboni is a beautiful story, and we all love it and everything. Bye, guy. I've been wanting you gone for 4 years. We should have traded you when you had the highest plus-minus in the league. The kids, I think Patra has high trade value right now, and I think Patra can go too. I think Patra is a good chip to use to get other things. I think Lysell and Steen also get them out of here. I think we should be raiding Seattle. I think we should be there are players out there that I know can be had, but we're going to have to pay up. And by paying up, it's going to be uncomfortable. McAvoy, I think, is a key to our culture. With Marchand and Pasta, I think that culture is our strength to a certain degree, but there is an underlying tone of loser culture behind it all. So I think those three are our strength, and I think that you need to supplement that culture with talent and guys that are going to give you an edge. We are like an infinity pool. We have no edge. So
So add some more.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
Add some toughness. I thought he was going to say trade Marchand or something like that. I'm glad he didn't. Because when you start saying, players that everybody likes, I was like, okay, well, that could be, one of the core guys that he just said don't trade.
Can I tack on a name here that he clearly missed?
Yeah.
It's Charlie Coyle. That's the answer. He's making way too much money. You bring in a center, you're going to have Zacha, Geeky, Frederick, and Patra coming back, and Beecher, who can all play center. You have to trade one of Zacha or Coyle. Coyle's making more money. Zacha's a fit with Pasta. I think you have to keep Zacha to keep Pastrnak happy.
So I don't agree with that. Like, I think what you got from Coyle this year, $5.25 million, is not overpaid.
Don't come out his BU
in the playoffs,
guys,
though.
Nico.
In the playoffs, though, Coyle was a massive disappointment.
Sure, but
he can't play in the top 6.
I think he can be a perfectly solid second liner if you have a clear number one above him. The problem this year is you needed one of him or Zacha to be a clear number one, and neither one was really capable of it. So that's why I think, like, whether it's Elias Lindholm or someone by trade, getting someone who plays above them and allows them to settle into a more natural role. Like, I don't have an issue with Coyle or Zacha being my number 2 center. I think Zacha can play wing as well. So I'm not going to be in any rush to trade away center depth. Patra, maybe Patra develops into a number 2 center next season and bumps Coyle back to the third line. Like,
by the way, we got a text that said, why did they shut down Patra for the entire season? Just to be clear, he's been out with an injury.
He had shoulder surgery.
Yes. So he was not available for the playoffs or anything like that.
Fluta Shinzawa tweeted that Matt Grzelcyk had a torn oblique. So, again, he's an unrestricted free agent. He's 30 years old. My guess is he's not going to be back unless it's on a very cheap contract, but he's probably gone anyways. So you have to worry about, trading him or moving on from him. Like, he's a free agent. He'll be gone, and like I said, unless there's mutual interest in like a very minimal amount of money on a short-term
and also
contract.
no like guaranteed top 6 spot.
No, yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. So there's more there that I want to react to because that's not the first call or text we've gotten from people who want bigger shakeups, which I just don't think is going to happen. But, we can get into it, though. And we do have more calls that we got to get to. Hour 3 of Sunday Skate coming up. We're with you up until noon. We'll be right back.
This is Sunday Skate with Scott McLaughlin, Andrew Razor Raycroft, and Bridgette Prue on WEEI.
Jim, just what did you say to the guys after this and thoughts on that in the series?
Yeah. I told them that I thanked them, and it was an honor to coach them because of the hard work and the competitiveness that they brought throughout the year. So that was the biggest thing I wanted to get across, and that, you're never happy when you don't win your last game of the year. And some players had tremendous growth this year, and they can be proud of that. And in the end, we have to find ways to get better and win our last game of the year.
Welcome back to Sunday Skate, Hour 3 here in WEI. I'm Scott McLaughlin with Bridgette Prue. Nico behind the glass. Hoping to have Razor at some point this hour. He had a busy morning with kids hockey, which we understand. He's got a team still playing, so unlike the Bruins, whose season ended.
Trying to do what Montgomery said, win the last game of the season.
Yep. Bruins season ended Friday night, Game 6 against the Florida Panthers. 2-1 loss, which we've been discussing that. We've been looking ahead to the offseason, talking about the season overall. We've had some feedback, some opinions on Don Sweeney, and we'll go to the phone lines here to Joe in Ohio, who has some thoughts on Sweeney. What's up, Joe?
Hey, how you doing, Scott and Bridgette?
Good.
Nice talking to you. Good. I called probably about a month or two ago applauding the job Don Sweeney has done, especially the last couple of years. I mean, last year, he set them up to win a Stanley Cup, was let down by players and coaches. Okay. So then he turns around this year with no cap space, hardly no assets, and gets a team to win 100, to get to the point to win 109 points. I just don't understand people looking at him. How about looking maybe a little bit at the coaching staff as far as, 7 too many men on the ice in 13 games? That might be an NHL playoff record that's going to stand for a while. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And I give the players credit this year. They played hard. They just didn't have the talent. This was not a Stanley Cup winning team. I think we all knew it. It was more of a transition year. I'm actually happy with the way they played and as far as they got. And I'm looking forward to see what Sweeney can do with cap space and maybe a few more assets. And really, Boston fans, get off his back. I said that 6 weeks ago or whatever. I'm just repeating myself again. Sorry, but I just don't understand it. And you guys had a wonderful show this year, and I really enjoyed it. So take care.
Thanks, Joe.
All right.
The opposite of the call that we got earlier, which was fire Sweeney. And I tend to agree with Joe's call quite a bit more. I think that Sweeney did what he had to do this season, and he found the cheaper players that I think did well for the Bruins. Morgan Geekie was a good find. That was a good move on his part. And now he does have more leeway, more cap space. He does have the ability to pull off something bigger.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a really fascinating summer because I do think like what Sweeney's proven and what Jay was touching on there is Sweeney has found depth players and he's found value. You know, whether that's a Heinen. You know, Van Riemsdyk had a really good first half of the season, obviously trailed off down the stretch. You know, we know he dealt with an illness. I'll be interested to hear, you know, some point today if there's any sort of injury affecting him. Shattenkirk for $1 million was, I think, exactly what you thought you were getting. You know, guy who could play in most games, was also a good leader when he wasn't in the lineup. Danton Heinen on league minimum after coming in on a PTO. Even, you know, Jesper Boquist starts the year in Providence, but ends up being a really solid fourth-line center for you. And then he fell out of the lineup in the playoffs, so I am interested to see what happens there. That's another one of those depth guys. He's a restricted free agent, so there's some team control. But is he back, or does that fourth-line center job get turned over to be Johnny Beecher's full-time, essentially? So, you know, Parker Wotherspoon was a really good find. Like, yep. That was someone who was, Justin Brazeau, absolutely. Like, those are guys who everyone else in the hockey world decided were career AHLers, and they're now NHL regulars for you. Like that, he deserves some credit for that. But now, this offseason, it is not about finding depth. You've got depth, and you know maybe you re-sign Heinen, maybe you bring back Maroon, but like. You're not out there looking to sign fourth liners and third pairing defenders. You're looking for impact, top of the line guys. So this is where you get tested more as a GM because you can throw darts lower in the lineup and hope a couple hit, and if a couple don't, you know, if Patrick Brown ends up in the AHL all season, like, so what? You know, he was under $1 million. When you spend big money in free agency, you better hit because we've seen bad signings, like whether it's here or elsewhere, and you see how much that can just drag a team down if you spend big money and get a guy who doesn't fit or starts to decline because he's in his 30s. So you get, like, I keep throwing out Elias Lindholm because, one, I know that's a player the Bruins have been interested in, and he fills their biggest position in need. But, like, you better be sure. Like, you don't give Elias Lindholm a big contract just because you need a center and, we got to do something. Like, if you look at him and evaluate and honestly determine, boy, there's some concerns there and we don't know if he's really worth it, then explore your other options. Like, don't give big money to someone that you're not totally sold on. So yeah, this is going to be fascinating.
And if they want a long-term solution too, if they're not just looking to sign a guy for a few years, like that takes a few guys off this list because they're in their there's some of the guys that are in their mid-30s that you know, those are not your long-term solutions. Those are maybe next year and the year after that solutions. If you add someone like that, like, so you probably want a younger guy that you can sign for a while, and you need to know that their contract isn't going to look bad in a few years from now if they just didn't pan out. Like you mentioned, Elias Lindholm, maybe he has some stretches where he's doesn't look as good, and some where he looks great. So yeah, that would be but I'm all for that deal, by the way, just to put that out there. Do you want to take another one of our calls?
But before we do,
Razor is on his way. He texted us,
yes.
By the way. He should be here any minute.
On Jim Montgomery, because he brought him up. How do we feel about Jim Montgomery after this playoff run?
I'm not in the fire Montgomery camp at all. Could he have done things differently, better? Absolutely. I think that there were moments where, and like he said, he took some accountability for the fact that they kept having these too many men on the ice situations, because when it happens that many times, it's not just like a stupid lapse of judgment by a player. Like it's systemic. If it keeps happening, there's something. And you know what? He was never able to find a way to get the power play going, and that's obviously a whole lot to do with the players as well. But most coaches, they push a few buttons and they get better results than what the Bruins did against the Panthers. 1 for 16 is not good enough.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fair criticism of Jim Montgomery and never getting the power play. Well, I shouldn't say never getting it figured out, because you had it going with kind of like the split units against Toronto. Now, part of that is that the Leafs had a really bad penalty kill. So you get in a series against a team with a better penalty kill, and yes, the 1 for 16 just isn't acceptable. So that's fair.
You thought that if they had lost against Toronto, he would have been fired.
Yeah. If they, for a second, if you blew a 3-1 series lead for the second year in a row, I don't really think any coach would have survived that. So I felt like he probably saved his job with winning that series. And then getting to, maybe if you go down in 4 or 5 against Florida, it becomes a conversation. I think getting to 6 in a series where you pretty clearly had the less talented roster, I don't think he's going anywhere. I think there's, again, fair criticisms and things to second guess and things he needs to get better at, including stylistically how they played offensively, where, we heard all season long they're quality over quantity. They're not a volume shooting team. And like I understand where that came from, because in past postseasons, they did need to get inside more. They had settled for too many outside shots. But when you get into this playoff run and you have multiple periods with 2, 3, 4 shots on goal, at some point you have to become more of a volume shooting team. And I do think they were too slow to kind of make that adjustment. Now they got more shots, more zone time in games 5 and 6 in this series. So it finally came a little bit. But I do think they were slow. They were too stubborn on we're going to try to work for, the perfect shot, or at least the higher quality shot. And there were times where they just had to put it on net more. Yeah.
And including defensemen. That certainly needs to be worked on for next season. Strategy change a little bit there. We'll want to take Jay from Winthrop, and then we will hopefully get Razor after the break.
Sure. Yeah, let's go to Jay from Winthrop, who has a trade idea. What's up, Jay?
Hey, I have a blockbuster trade with the Philadelphia Flyers. Pastrnak and Fredericks to Philadelphia for Travis Konecny, Forestry, and Hathaway, or that other big fighter.
Jay, your phone is just not good here.
No, it totally went out. But also, no, they're not trading David Pastrnak. So
no,
no matter who you listed on the other side of that trade to Philly.
I heard Travis Konecny in there, but unfortunately, we couldn't make out what the full trade package was going to be there. I like Travis Konecny as a player. I don't know what else was in there, but you're not trading David Pastrnak. Nope. It's just not. We're talking about a team that needs more offense. You're not getting more offense by trading away David Pastrnak, one of the 5 best offensive players in the world. All right, we do have to catch a break here. We hope to have Razor after this break. You can call in 617-779-7937. Text us 37937. Bridgette has you trending, and then we'll have more Sunday Skate.
Brad, how proud of you of this group, the way they battle?
Yeah, I really can't even put into words how proud I am of this group. I mean, from where we started, the expectations to start the season, everybody wrote us off said we wouldn't even be a playoff team. And we were one of the best teams in the league. And, we had a lot of new guys, a lot of new roles, and guys came in and we built something special. Started in the room and carried onto the ice. And, we had some hiccups along the way, but from where we started and where we finished, I couldn't be more proud of the guys and, just seeing different guys flourish in different roles and, the stories that kind of came in this season. This was one of our best defensemen by the end of the year, and Brad's been on a one-way deal in the American League, and pretty much solidified himself a spot for next year. So, I could go on and on, but I couldn't be more proud of every guy in this room, and not just who they are as players, but even better people. And that's what makes it so fun coming to the rink every day is who we get to be with, who we get to play with and roll with, and so it was a special year.
Welcome back to Sunday Skate. I'm Scott McLaughlin with Bridgette Prue and Razor.
Razor's here.
Good morning. Better late than never. Is that what they say?
So,
I apologize.
Do you have good news to bring?
No, it was a good day. It was good. It was like a camp thing. So
okay.
He did good. Yeah, he had a great weekend. So it was good. And,
awesome.
And I got to do my dad thing. So I appreciate you guys letting me do the dad thing. So it was great.
Well, now it's the off season, so
it is.
You get more time to do the dad thing.
Yes, that's right, which is nice.
Okay, we're just going to throw every question at you.
Yeah, exactly. I've been listening. I heard like the first half hour, then I ran in, then I just heard the last half hour. Seemed all pretty reasonable. I knew the guy from Chicago. That he got us last year a bunch of times. Remember him, Scotty?
Yes.
I saw that. I heard him like, if I was there, I would have screened that one. But so we'll go past that guy. Listen, very quickly, and we just heard Brad. That's kind of how I felt. Like I came out of that game 6, like, man, they played really hard. They gave us all some good entertainment. They worked hard. And at the end of the day, it just, it's the NHL, and you get to the top 8, you have to be better. You need a lot of great players to continue to move on, and they just came up a little bit short. They underscored, and they had to overscore, right? Like David had to overscore, and the rest of the guys had to overscore to beat Florida, and they ended up underscoring, which really at the end of the day, that's the difference.
So how much of, because we've been talking about this and looking ahead to the offseason a bit, but how much of that is guys here now had to be better versus they just need more talent up front? Like they just need at least one more difference maker.
Yeah, he's going to have a lot of room. There's going to be money. There's going to be options. Again, last summer, we forget, like no trades. No one to sign. It was across the board. It was across the league. It wasn't just a Bruins issue. This year, it'll be the opposite. I think everyone will be very, very excited to make moves and make deals and want to change and have the opportunity to change. That's all the GMs and the organizations. But so again, so the question, I think it's more going out and getting more. I think. Listen, if they score, they had 3 breakaways in Game 4. They have a couple breakaways in Game 6. Like those opportunities at home in 4 and 6, even in Game 2 on the road in the first period. Beecher has an open net. Marshy has an open net. That they could have pulled away in that first period and hung on. So there was opportunities to score. To the question, did they not score those plays because the talent wasn't enough, or because their guys just didn't make weren't good enough in that moment? And I think it's a bit of both. I think David certainly had opportunities to score and he didn't. There's no question that he's good enough to do that. Maybe the Heinens of the world, you're saying, well, if you had a Reinhart or a Bennett as that secondary scoring rather than Heinen, that might go in. So I think it's a bit of both in the opportunities that they had to break the series or get the one up on the series because of their goaltender that they weren't able to do.
Yeah, and to talk about some of the things that we had a chance to weigh in on, but what free agents that are going to be on the market would you target?
Well, you made a great point in how hard it is to do that. It's not easy just to give out 8 years, $56 million contracts left and right. It's hard to and the Bruins, listen, the Bruins have done a very good job of it. I don't expect them to make the biggest, they're not going out and getting, we've seen this over and over and time again. They don't just pay for the best guy. They need a fit. There has to be a fit of a kind of person, kind of player, kind of character that they take. That's why the culture is what it is. They don't just go out and try and grab the biggest fish. So I don't know. I mean, Lindholm makes sense, but you're not going to get like a 40-goal score. He's not a 40-goal scorer. I know he did it once, but that's not really what he is. So are you?
Would he be next to Pastrnak? I mean, do you think his production would increase next to Pastrnak?
I don't know if. Well, it should. Yes, in theory it should, but it's not going to be more goals. Like David needs a playmaker. I'm more thinking of a guy who makes plays from the middle of the ice. Matt Duchene's out. Like Matt Duchene isn't going to fit here.
No,
he's probably not coming here either because he loves country music. This isn't his scene, and that's the other part of it. So I look at the free agent list. I literally just did it kind of this morning because I knew we were going to talk about it. I don't see anything. No one jumps out at me.
Really?
No one jumps out like, wow, that's an automatic. So I'm curious, like all of us, kind of what they do and do they make it through trade?
Are there any automatic guys that the Bruins have on their current roster that are free agents that you think that they should absolutely try to re-sign?
I think Heinen's the one for me. I think DeBrusk is going to be difficult. I feel like, especially after the great playoff he had, I think someone is going to give him money that he just can't turn down because I think the Bruins are going to be, they're going to hold their market. That one's interesting because, again, I think as hard of a time Jake's had at times here, I think he proves it. He proved it again this year. He can play in the playoffs, and he's a young guy still. He's still getting better. He's going to be good wherever if he goes somewhere else, I feel like he's really going to pop because he's just going to be kind of freer. But Heinen's kind of the guy just because he can move through the lineup, and now he won't have to move through. You hope they can spend a little money up front. He can be the third, fourth line guy, whether it's left wing, right wing, center on the third line, left wing, right wing, center on the fourth line. Fits in really well. So I'd like to see that one. Everyone else is kind of, maybe, but
what about Pat Maroon?
I don't think
he said today he wants to be back.
Yeah, that's the right thing to say in your meetings.
So did Dmitry Orlov. So did Tyler Bertuzzi.
I think it would have to be a perfect scenario. I think it'd be hard with where the Bruins are at with some of their players in the bottom six to keep him. And if they do, he'd have to be willing to play 50 games. He's not an everyday guy in this lineup from the way I see it, especially because you assume Reeves isn't going to be in Toronto anymore. And I know he has a big contract, but it's just that, they're going to have a new coach. It's not going to look the same for him either. I just don't know how that fits in. But of course, if he's going to play for 800 and he's going to play 50 games, then yeah, you want a guy who won cups and have him around. That's absolutely, but he won't play 13 straight games, I don't think, in the regular season like he did here in the playoffs.
Yeah, I definitely like the idea of Heinen. We've barely talked about him today, but that makes all sense in the world. Obviously, he's going to get a raise. He was here on league minimum, veteran minimum this year. I would say, safely at least double that salary to $1.5, $2 million, somewhere around there. But I'm okay with that because of that versatility you mentioned. Up and down the lineup, either wing. That's just can kill penalties. Like that's just a valuable player to have to be able to put anywhere. DeBrusk. I think you're right that if he gets to the open market, someone's going to pay him. If I'm the Bruins, I'm trying to maybe get him a little below what you project as his open market number. Have those talks now, and we see this every year that there's guys who get signed in this period between now and July 1st. I would definitely be trying to do that if I'm the Bruins, because if you lose DeBrusk, to me, even if you go out and get Elias Lindholm or trade for your number one center, you're still looking for another scoring winger. And at that point, it's got to be either at least an equivalent of DeBrusk or an upgrade, and that's going to cost money too. So either way, like you're spending there. So
that's it. Yeah, that's it. And we talked about that maybe at the deadline when we were talking,
Yeah.
Which was, okay, yeah, you trade DeBrusk, great, but then who fills that? Like, someone's got to fill an automatic 20 goals and maybe 30. So that's not easy to find, and you're not going to get it for less than whatever DeBrusk is going to get. So that's kind of where you have to balance out and think about it from Don Sweeney's point of view. It's not just like get rid of guys and get new guys. Well, you have to, there's trade-offs in that, and the guy you have and know, and the guy that guys like on this team that we know is usually, a little bit safer than going for someone you don't know.
Yeah, and you're not trying to subtract from your top six. You're trying to add. So, I think they like DeBrusk. I think all his teammates like him. I think he wants to stay here. I know he, years ago, wanted to get traded, but that was under a different head coach, and he doesn't feel that way anymore. So, I think that if you look back on it in hindsight, the Bruins messed up by not extending him during the season because he probably brought his value up with what he did in the playoffs. And so, yeah, he would have liked to maybe get it done a little bit earlier if that's the goal, and they eventually get it done. It might be a little bit more expensive now than if they had done it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, but he might not have wanted to sign during the season. Because,
he might have said, I'll
right.
take 8 times 8 and I'm going to roll the dice. Like,
yeah.
That's why it's hard. Like, that's why the speculation on this, like, again, it goes back. Maybe he doesn't want to, maybe he wants to go back out west. Like, there's so many variables with when you're an unrestricted free agent. Guys, wives, girlfriends, we've heard it with the Patriots. You're going to hear it with it. Like, there's so many variables on why guys go to certain teams and why they don't. And it's not as simple as just saying, okay, well, yeah, we'll just give you the contract. Salary cap, in this salary cap, it's a real hard salary cap. Guys are looking for different little angles all the time because they can't really fulfill or maximize their dollar value. So they're always, tax situations, weather situations, wife situation, all of these things. There's a lot of it, and this list of UFAs in front of me are all taking that into account a lot more than the other leagues because it's not just about dollars in the NHL because you can only get so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
that's why everybody wants to go to Florida.
Correct.
Tax
breaks.
breaks.
They tax breaks. You've got Fort Lauderdale. You live on the beach. You can walk to the rink. Like those things. And the Bruins in hockey, fortunately, are favorable to a lot of players, and that's why you'll see a couple guys come here because they love Boston, they love this area, and they love the culture. So the Bruins are actually on the right side, rather than maybe the Patriots are on the wrong side of like where players want to play. The Bruins are actually on the right side, and they're able to get guys at smaller Taylor Hall, example number one.
Yeah, and presumably like guys are going to have the right attitude because I think everyone knows if you come to Boston, that's original six hockey crazy market. Like the guys coming here are guys who want to be a part of that. So
yeah, and that's why Pierre-Luc Dubois is not ever coming to Boston. That's why Matt Duchene's probably not coming to Boston. Like, there's guys that just wouldn't fit here.
Yeah.
But I do want to get to the most important goalie questions, Razor. First of all, do we see the goalie duo next year? Is
no,
this
I don't see how. Yeah, this has got to be it. I don't know how it works. It just doesn't work for either guy. I don't think it works for either guy at this point, and it ran its course beautifully. It worked out really well. So now there's windows to get traded. Linus Ullmark, you guys talked about it. He's going to be more than coveted in trading over the summer. That doesn't mean you're going to get Connor McDavid back in a trade, folks. It's still just a goalie. There's lots of goalies out there, but he's a valuable one.
I like how you said that.
He's just a goalie. He is just a goalie. We see that. So he'll it just doesn't run back, right? It doesn't run back for him. It doesn't run back for Swayman. It doesn't run back for the Bruins. They can't spend over $10 million on goaltenders in a cap situation. So they will find a way, and I'm sure Linus will be happily moved on, and he would have had a good run. That's my sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's going into a contract year. I'm sure he's going to want to start, and maybe if he's back, like if they didn't find a deal, maybe you're still splitting time in the regular season. But like he's gonna he saw the writing on the wall. Like, he saw Swayman run with the job this postseason, and Swayman's going to get a big contract, and he's not giving that job back. Like, it's his now. So you would assume Allmark, he should want to go somewhere and be a number one. Although I saw, he talked at breakup day today.
I was just going to say, he was being a little bit of a jokester. He that's just his sense of humor. That's his personality. But he said, my future here, I have one more year.
Yeah.
He's got 1 year left on his contract. But, technically that's correct. But I think that he says it tongue-in-cheek because he knows.
Yeah, and again, he does have a 15-team no trade, so there are definitely places he can block a trade if he's, whether it's all the reasons Razor covered, any of those that are why he doesn't want to go somewhere or, doesn't want to go to a rebuilding team or whatever it might be. He has some control, but there's also still 16 teams that aren't going to be covered on his list. And
that's the big, if it was fully no move, then I wouldn't be so sure. And I'm never 100% sure in this game because just craziness happens. But if it was a full no move, I might take his answer a little differently.
Yeah.
But to me, that unfortunately it doesn't really matter. There's 16. One of those 16 will do a deal, and the Bruins probably have to get out from underneath the $5 million.
But that's
even
a great contract
even
for other
for a
teams.
draft pick.
Like that's not a bad contract for a number one goalie.
For sure.
That's why he should have a lot of trade value.
They'll be able to. Most teams will be able to work him in. Yeah, exactly.
We've gotten a couple texts about people have brought up Fabian Lysell when we talked about needing scoring. Yeah, look, it would be awesome if Fabian Lysell is ready to be a contributor next year. Like, you always need young guys to step up. This year, you saw Mason Laura. You saw Johnny Beecher run with a fourth-line job. You saw Matt Pastrnak contribute early in the year, and he's going to be back healthy to go for training camp in the start of the season. I would say my overarching approach with any of those young guys, including Lysell and Patra, is if you get something from them, great, but I'm not going to the season penciling Fabian Lysell in as a middle six winger saying, okay, well, that's going to be our scoring upgrade. Like, hope you get it. Don't count on it. Don't put yourself in a position where you need Fabian Lysell to be a contributor offensively next season.
That's not the way I don't think Sweeney will approach it that way because that just seems crazy. But, you need outside help too, not just, and I'm not talking about considering Providence as outside help. That's internal. So, and we haven't seen, we've seen all these other guys come up and that are, Patra's younger than Lysell. He hasn't broke through yet. He's had he's been around for training camp and for preseason and whatnot, but he needs to win the job first before you can say he's a solution for you guys. At least not this year, this upcoming year.
Yeah, I was told he was really good. Really, really good the last month, and then he got injured. But he was playing really well, starting to kind of, and when I say figure it out, everybody has to figure it out a little bit differently. It doesn't mean that there's just things. Everybody has things that are their hang-ups, and he was starting to get through that, and he got injured, which is unfortunate. But you have to give him a look. You have to give him a look next season on some level. That doesn't mean, of course, he's not guaranteed a spot. They're not going to just, open up the right wing for him or open up a center position for him. But he has to play some games because you have to find out what you have. You didn't know what Brazeau was like, and you would assume that he wasn't an NHLer, and then he plays, and oh, my God, he's an NHLer. Lysell could be that, too. There's a lot of guys that play in the minors that kind of just plug along, and then they get to the NHL and they pop. And he might be one of those kids. He's had a tough go at times, and I think next year he gets his look because you have to find out what you have here in the next 12 months.
And if he turns out to be, a big contributor to the Bruins offense over the next upcoming several seasons, or in his career in general, then Don Sweeney, people still bring up Don Sweeney being a bad drafter, but there's been plenty of great players since the 2015 draft that he's picked up that Lysell, like Lysell in the first round, but like Patra later on in the second round. And yeah, it'd be great to see them have Lysell as an option because his contract is cheap. And so it allows you to be a little bit more flexible with also adding someone else because it's a rookie contract.
Yeah, the one thing that hurts Sweeney on Lysell is that player who was picked right behind him, Wyatt Johnston.
Yeah.
You already see making an impact with Dallas, but, you know, like it happened. Wyatt Johnston was
23 other teams passed on
Wyatt Johnston's the only player from the second half of that first round who's done anything so far. Yeah. So you can point to everyone and say, how do they miss on Wyatt Johnston?
They should have taken Wyatt Johnson first overall, whoever that was that year. Like that, they missed first overall, not taking Wyatt. And that was COVID year too, right? Like no one really played. Yep. Wyatt Johnson played like 10 games in junior hockey that year. It was,
exactly.
The draft thing, whatever. Like you're throwing darts at the wall in the draft, folks. I can't explain it anymore. I know we have NFL draft in our head, and everyone here watches NFL draft, and like these guys translate. NHL draft is different, and if you walk,
Jeremy Swayman
just go to a junior hockey rink and watch 18-year-old kids. I just watched 14-year-old kid, 15-year-old kid. They're all the same. They all look the same. And if you think you know what you're doing by picking out 18-year-old kids to play in the NHL when they're 24, you're fooling everybody.
Except for Macklin Celebrini.
Yeah. Well, be first overall. See how much fun it is to be San Jose. That's easy.
Yeah.
All right. We got to catch a break here, but we'll be right back with more Sunday Skate. All right. Welcome back to Sunday Skate, our final segment of the season as we wrap up here heading into the Bruins offseason after their Game 6 loss to the Florida Panthers on Friday night. I'm Scott McLaughlin with Andrew Raycroft and Bridgette Prue.
It's too bad we weren't previewing Game 7 right now.
Yeah, that would be a lot more fun.
Yep.
Would have been nice. Like I was really hoping. I didn't have asked. You know, again, you saw what it was on the ice, but you were hoping that they got a home win. It felt like they deserved. The fans certainly deserved a home win, especially in that second series, and it would have been just nice for them to battle in Game 7. But that's what happens.
So. We briefly touched on this earlier, and I have absolutely no explanation for it or theory, but do you have any idea like why this team has struggled so much at home in the playoffs? 2-5 on home ice this year.
I think everyone's struggling at home. They were 4-2 against Florida in the last 2 years in Florida. So, Florida was conversely, Florida was 2-4 against the team that they beat twice on home ice. I think everything's kind of neutral now. The big thing for me is there's no longer home ice matchup advantages. Every team's kind of built the same. Their third and fourth lines are all pretty good defensively. They're all pretty quick. They're all able to get pucks out of the zone. You don't ever get easy matchups like you used to 10, 12 years ago, where teams and lines and players were built completely differently. And you could take advantage of a quick line against a heavy line or a heavy line against a soft line. You can't do that anymore. Everyone's kind of the same. So I feel like there's no real match. We don't talk about matchups anymore, right? Like you kind of do it in the first game, and then you realize everyone's just rolling their lines over. There's really no like Coyle against Barkov. Like you kind of see it, but it's not necessary. And so I think that's a big part of it. The games, the buildings, and the teams are all pretty much the same. So I think you just get a little bit of a simpler game from these road teams, and they end up feeling a little bit more comfortable, a little bit less pressure. But it translates kind of throughout the entire league, where the road teams look at it. All the Game 6s, other than the Edmonton one, were all won on visiting ice, but they all lost Game 5 at home. So the better team lost on Game 5 at home ice, and then won in Game 6 on the road. So I think it's systemic throughout the league that teams just lose on home ice in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the Colorado Avalanche, a team with Cup pedigree, just went 0-3 on home ice against Dallas.
And they had the best record at home.
Yeah.
Like they were great at home in the regular season. So it's just a weird thing in the playoffs. I think you almost want road. You don't want to start on home ice in the series. I think you get behind it.
That's really why the Bruins lost that last game of the regular season.
That's right.
It wasn't for the Toronto matchup. It was they wanted to be a road team against Florida.
I still would have loved to have seen them play differently in the first, but that's a whole.
Yeah,
we don't have time for that.
No. So the main thing we want to ask you about here to finish things out is Swayman's contract.
Yeah.
Because now we're at the end of the season. Swayman has significantly increased his value, it seems, in the playoffs, and probably maybe even extended the term. What are you expecting to see the Bruins do with that contract?
The other thing that he did, and this should be good for everybody, including management, ownership, the whole organization, the fan, is prove that he is that guy. Like that's the big thing for me. Like if we went into this playoff and they had a rotated for the last 13 games and we went back and forth and they each were 3-3 in those 7 games that they play, Swayman 3-3 and Allmark 3-4, and they won the first round, but they went back and forth the whole way. I'd be very nervous about giving somebody a lot of money. I just would. And I think what Swayman did should put everybody at ease. So, including Don Sweeney, including ownership, to hand him over some money, because they were going to have to pay him either way to keep him. And now you can pay him and give him the money and feel very comfortable and know what you have. So it doesn't, for me, I guess, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't think it really matters to me, or it shouldn't matter to the fan base, whether he gets 7 times 7, 7 times 8, 6 times 7, 6 times 9, whatever it is, it's going to be in that range. He's not pushing 10. He's not breaking the bank. So you're essentially going to have the same. This year they had 8.5 tied up in goaltending. They're going to have about 8.5 tied up in goaltending next year. 7 for him, 1.5 for a veteran guy that they're going to have to go get. And that's it. And Swayman now plays 50 games. So I think for me, the takeaway on the contract stuff is whatever he gets, he's actually really, truly deserved it.
Yeah, and ideally that's one of the first pieces of business you get done, hopefully before July 1. So then you go into free agency knowing exactly what you have to work with, and it's not like, well, we need to keep this set aside for Swayman. Like, get that done now. Like, hit those negotiations hard right now and get that done well ahead of July 1.
Do you think they could just elevate Bussy as the backup?
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Same idea. You don't just elevate guys because they're in the minors, right? You gotta earn it.
He did. I will say, I think he looks like a good goaltender in the sample size I've seen.
Yeah, sure, but he's never played an NHL game.
Yep.
So you got to get another guy in, and again, you just like Lysell, like we're talking about, guy, you can beat guys out over a season and come, but you're not just leaving that spot open. You have to. The way that, and because again, Swayman's not playing 65 games. They don't believe in it. That's not going to happen next year. So you need to go get a David Rittich. You need to go get a Cam, whatever these guys are for 1.5 and have him here. And he's going to be a big piece. I promise you the second goalie will be a big piece for the Bruins because that has been the case for 17 years now.
Yeah, I mean, Tuukka Rask always had Halak, Hudobin, good, solid backups. Now, in that case, that was also because Tuukka was getting later on in his career, and they wanted to manage it more. I wouldn't be opposed to going cheap and like having Bussy and DiPietro battle for it in camp. Like, I'd be fine with that, but I do also think there's value to what you're saying of get a more proven veteran backup. Like, because even if it ended up being one of the young guys, there's probably a veteran that they'd have in the AHL that. We've seen them do that before, your Keith Kincaid or Troy Grosn, that kind of guy.
Yeah, and again, just think about you're not a team that's hoping to get into the draft lottery next year. You're a team again, 110 points. Swayman goes down in November for 5 weeks. You can't have Bussy and DiPietro. You have to have it. That's why you need a lot of insurance. So that's why they're going to go get a real guy.
Fair enough. Quickly before we wrap up here, we had calls earlier. People wanted to really shake up the defense, like trade Lindholm or trade Carlo. Do you think they need to do anything significant on defense, or are you more or less focusing elsewhere and kind of keep what you have?
They need scoring. They need to sign. You need to find a defenseman that's big and long and difficult to play against for, a Derek Forbert signing 3x3 somewhere. That's not really shaking things up, but that's what I would expect them to do on the back end. They have 6 guys that are really good right now. They need one more guy and allow the younger guys to fight it out.
I'm trolling Scott right now with this.
I agree with the Razor's approach, and I'm not going to acknowledge Bridgette's song choice.
This is because I sing this to him every game. I sing this to him every game, and he hid from me last game, so I couldn't sing it to him, so I had to get him.
Good job.
Yep.
All right, that'll do it for Sunday Skate. Red Sox baseball coming up next. Thank you, everyone who listened all season long. We appreciate it.
Hey, guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.